Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to speak here today to the team at the Turkish Publishers Association. It's an honor for us to come all this way to talk to you, and I hope that I can introduce you to a few things that my company does that helps the industry and also helps organizations like Nielsen produce the sorts of insights that you've just seen from Andre. My name is Graham Bell, and you'll have to forgive me because I need to control the computer as well, so I will at times just move away from the microphone. I've been around in publishing for 20 years, and often I've worked in the middle of a big long table. At one end of the table there are the creative people in our industry, the authors, the editors, the designers, the artists, the photographers. And at the other end of the table, there are all the technical people, the data analysts, the people who work in sales. They're much more data focused, they're much more focused on the efficiency of the supply chain. And part of the problem with these two groups of people is that they don't speak the same language. It's kind of like people at that end of the table are speaking Turkish and people at this end of the table are speaking English. Those two groups, the creative side and the more technical side of our industry, do not communicate well. I've often sat in the middle of the table throughout my whole career and acted as a translator between the two. I have great admiration for the translators at the back of the room here who are doing such a good job today. I worked for HarperCollins in the UK for 15 years, doing that translation work, in a sense, between technical and creative, and building computer systems for my company. In 2010, I left Collins and joined an organization called EDItEUR. Now, EDItEUR is a very small, not-for-profit organization. We don't make any profit, and we don't aim to make any profit either. We aim to build a better industry. We do lots of work. We work very hard to deliver things that help the industry, and then in fact we give them away for free to everybody. Sometimes people accuse us of having a business model, but we don't. We work hard, we do stuff, we give it away for free for the most part. Now, we're based in London. We do technical work that helps the supply chain, and we're funded because when we give this work away, it helps people, and just some of them then say, this is really useful, I'll give them some money so they can continue working next year. We have members who fund us in effect, and they get very little for it. The occasional phone call is really all they get, but we give the work away to everybody, and it's funded by our members. Our members are all over the world. There are members in Europe, there are members in North America, there are members in China and Japan and Korea as well. They're also, our members, spread through the supply chain. We have publishers who are members. We have trade organizations like publishers associations. We have retailers, we have libraries, we have software suppliers. All of these organizations are members of EDItEUR, and each of them pays a little bit of money each year so that we can continue to do our work. And the Turkish Publishers Association is a member of ours, and I say thank you to them for that. So that really begs the question, what do we do? EDItEUR creates, supports, develops, maintains technical standards that organizations like publishers and retailers can use to communicate with their business partners. So a publisher needs to communicate information with a retailer or with a library or with a distributor, and we develop standards to help people do that. Some of you will have heard of some of our standards. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Onyx standard. Just hands up, who has heard of Onyx? So a small proportion of you, that's interesting. It's slightly more than I expected. Oh, an extra couple of late arrivals at the back there. That's very pleasing for me because it's a slightly higher proportion than I expected. We also develop a standard called Thema, which I'll also be talking about today. So hands up who's heard of Thema? Okay, so a much smaller group, and I hope that I can increase that proportion today. EDItEUR also provides assistance to other standards organisations. So there's 3 listed there. We do work for the ISNI IA, that's the ISNI International Agency. Now, I suspect if I asked, maybe 1 or 2 people would put their hands up to say, I have heard of ISNI. Yes, there are 2, plus you, Andre. And again, I hope to remedy that today. Nobody will have heard of the IDF, but you might have heard of the DOI, the Digital Object Identifier. Just, 4 maybe, okay. And LCC, this is the trick question. Has anybody heard of LCC? Okay, now be careful putting your hand up because I may ask you to explain it. So we also work closely with lots of other standards organisations because our industry relies on technical standards. And member participation is vital for us. Our members pay for EDItEUR to exist, but they're even more important than that because we need to know what is happening in your market. Because as I'll explain later, as your market changes, we also need to make sure that the standards change as well. And I'll explain why in a moment. So as I mentioned, we have a little family of standards. There's Onyx is a family in itself, but today we'll talk about Onyx for books. We'll talk a little bit about Thema. Now, Thema is a subject classification system. It answers the question, what is your book about? Is it a story about boy wizards? Is it a book of agricultural statistics? Is it a book about the Portuguese language? Knowing what a book is about is part of the basis for Andre's statistics. We have some other standards as well that I won't be mentioning today. We have Editex, Edifact, ICDIS. In fact, Edifact is our most used standard. Most people don't know they're using it. And it's 30 years old and we've never changed it. So it doesn't get a great deal of attention. This is a quote from my friend Brian O'Leary, who is currently the Executive Director of the Book Industry Study Group in New York. And he alludes to the importance of standards. What he means by this, in the future, adherence to standards will not be an option. It doesn't mean that you will be forced to use standards like Onyx or Thema. What he means is they are so important to the future of your business that you will want to use them. You will want to use them to cooperate and coordinate with other organizations in the same industry. Standards are kind of like this. This is my favorite slide. I try to show this slide in every single presentation I give. Because this slide is, it means several different things to me. It first of all means that standards can be very successful nationally. That British electric plug on that side, technically it's a really good plug. It's very safe, it's very robust. It may be the best engineered electric plug in the world. But it's no good at all if the socket looks like that. Standards are good, but international standards are better. Having the ability to use the same plug everywhere in the world. Andre and I do a lot of traveling. Wouldn't it be good if we didn't have to carry all of those adapters? So whilst standards themselves are good in themselves, standards that cross borders, standards that enable a global industry are even better. And standards have a purpose. Standards are there to solve business problems, your business problems. Standards don't just exist in a vacuum. They exist because you have a problem and doing it the same way as everybody else is valuable to you. having a standard solves a problem. And therein lies part of the importance of EDItEUR. We're about creating standards that work globally. Our members keep us in touch with the real business problems they have. And we can make sure that our standards match and hopefully help solve those business problems. Now, there are lots of business problems in the book publishing world. We talked extensively about the pricing problem this morning. There are all sorts of other problems. That asterisk, the star at the top of the slide, is there to remind me that these are not your only business problems, but they are the ones that I'm going to tackle today. First of all, the book industry is increasingly global. I mean, that's always been the way for British publishers who are publishing in English. A third of all the books that we publish are exported to other countries around the world. We also sell a lot of rights in English language books to other people. So the international book market in Britain has always been there. But increasingly that internationalization of the market applies to other languages as well. Your Turkish book market, yes, it's the 80 million Turks here who are avid readers of books. But it's also the 5 or 10 million Turks around the world who can buy Turkish books via the internet. They don't need to, if they're working in Germany, for example, buy German books. They can buy Turkish books in the Turkish language from a Turkish retailer through the internet. The increasing internationalization of the market makes things more complicated. The other thing is the explosion of catalogue size, just the sheer number of books that are published. Now, I started work in the book publishing industry in 1996, and before that I'd been in the magazine world. I moved into book publishing in 1996, and one of the first meetings I attended, somebody was explaining how we were going to publish fewer books. We were publishing too many different titles, and we needed to cut it down by about 10%. We needed to go from publishing 800 books a year to publishing 700 books a year. What's happened? Well, that company is now publishing nearly 2,000 books a year. Publishers always talk about reducing the number of books that are being published, the number of different titles, and they always do exactly the opposite. The number of books that are being published every year is going up and up and up, and this is true in Turkish as well as in English. It's also the case that books used to go out of print, but now, because many of those books are e-books, they never go out of print. They remain available essentially forever. So the number of books that are available in the market is exploding. It's going up hugely. And that has implications for our industry because more and more we have to treat our industry as something that is automated. If you're publishing 5 books a year, you can take every single one and polish it like a diamond. You can take personal care of that book or those 5 books a year. If your publishing company is publishing 500 books a year, then you need something much more like a production line. You need to specialize in what you do, and you need to automate. If you're a retailer, having 25,000 books available in the market, as was the case in Turkey, let's say 10, 15 years ago, yeah, that was okay. But now you've got about 60, 70,000 new books coming out every single year, and that's not counting the limited amount of Turkish self-publishing. A retailer has to have a certain level of automation, and that implies it also has to have a certain level of standardization. More and more, there's a challenge around the book. Most of your sales now happen in the absence of the book. It used to be, 10, 20 years ago, most of your sales happened because a consumer went to a bookshop and they saw the book on the shelf and they picked the book and they bought that book. The book was what they bought. Nowadays, the consumer goes online and they buy a book based on its metadata. They don't buy the book based on the book itself. they buy the book based on information about the book. And as I'll show you in a moment, the more information they have, the more likely they are to buy it. So most sales happen in the absence of a book. They happen because of data about the book, metadata. We've already heard today a certain amount of concern about the advent of Amazon.com.tr. This already works, it's already in place. It's currently a small division of Amazon.de, Amazon Germany, but it will inevitably be based here quite soon. I know nothing of their plans, but I do know what Amazon does in every other country, and they rely on high quality data about the products. All of this puts pressure on publishers' margins, and the only way you can fight back as publishers is not necessarily through fixed pricing. Like Andre, I have my own private views on fixed pricing, and I would warn you about unintended consequences. But one of the key things you can do is make sure that Amazon has strong competition. Amazon cannot dominate your market if it doesn't dominate its own. So you need to make sure that other booksellers have a good chance of selling your books. And again, one of the ways you can do that is to provide really good data about your books to other online retailers. Scale and automation are important words in our industry. This is one of the rooms in the Stockholm Public Library. There's about 25,000 books in that picture. You need 2.5 rooms that size every year to have one copy of every book published in Turkey. There's a huge scale problem. And to fix that scale problem, you need automation. By the way, in the UK, we need 6 rooms that size every year. And this is the problem of the internet. Whatever you search for on the internet, there are 841,000 replies. It doesn't matter what you search for, there will always be 841,000 of them somewhere on the internet. Your job as publishers is about making sure that your books are near the top of that list. And you do that with good data. Why do I say this? Well, I say this because Nielsen has studied these things. Nielsen, unfortunately, are almost the only people to have studied this well. So I've no apologies in showing this particular study and this one. One based on a study of sales data in the UK, one based on sales in the US. Now, we don't have great data about sales in non-English language markets, but we can pretty much guarantee that the major trends that I'm about to show you will be true here as well. Now, this study was a study of the relationship between how good your data is and how many copies of the books you sold. And very strongly from this study, we see that better data and more sales goes together. Now, I'm not necessarily saying this is a causal relationship. I'm not saying that better metadata causes better sales, but the relationship is really strong. I'm also not saying that your metadata, your data about the books, needs to be particularly sophisticated. This study only studied the very basic types of data. The ISBN, the title, what I call the product form, that's the binding. Is it a hardback? Is it a paperback? Is it an ebook? What is the book about? The subject code. What was the branding of the book? The name of the publisher, usually. And a picture of the cover. Those are the main things. Just 11 pieces of metadata. And the study that I'm about to show some graphs, because I can do graphs as well. I'm about to show you some graphs, and the graphs show you the difference between having all 11 bits of data. None of that is complicated. But if you have all 11, you're in one part of the graph. And if you have just 10 of them, or 9 of them, you're in a different part of the graph. I'm also dividing the market into the same broad categories as Andre: fiction, specialist non-fiction, trade non-fiction, which is non-specialist non-fiction, and kids' books. And the darkest blue are the sales of the books which have the least good data. It doesn't mean they have no data, it just means that one or two of those 11 data points are missing. And the higher parts of the graph are about the sales of books where all 11 of those data points are present. And you can see in every case, it makes a significant difference. Now, it makes more difference in fiction than it does in specialist non-fiction, but in every case, better data shows up as more sales. It's also the case that, in this case, delivering the data on time also improves sales. There's no point in publishing a book in January and delivering the data in May. That doesn't work. I've tried it. We've all made these mistakes, but delivering the data on time, and that means 3 or 4 or 5 months before you publish the book. Deliver the data 4 months in advance, and that's ideal for everybody, and also increases your sales. Now, those two graphs encapsulate the situation that's both online and offline on the street. This statement is somewhere else in the report, and it just concerns online data. Again, the more data you deliver, the more sales you get. And this only works if you've got that effective communication and hopefully largely automated communication, because nobody can afford the people to do this manually. Automated communication between computer systems enables this to work on a broad scale with tens or even hundreds of thousands of books. Now, I apologize for the picture. I'm a great fan of Russian constructivist art, so I picked this poster to illustrate the fact that when we do have standards, people often think about standards as a way of fossilizing what we used to do. So the standard is the same as the standard that it was in 1992, or indeed in 1892. EDItEUR doesn't think of standards that way. Standards have to evolve. The word standard in English actually has a second meaning. It means a flag. And that's the flag that you rally towards. And then you move the flag, and that's how armies advance. The standard is something to, first of all, aspire to, and then achieve, and then make it better. Standards have to evolve in line with changing business practices. Standards are there to solve problems, and as the problems change, the standards also have to change. Standards solve business problems, and standards must evolve as the business problems change. There are also many other commercial effects of standards. I'll pick out a few. First of all, EDItEUR standards are open. Everybody can use them. They're free of charge. Everybody can use them without paying EDItEUR. And that creates a level playing field. Whether you are the size of Penguin Random House, who's one of our larger members at EDItEUR, or you're the size of Snow Books, a little tiny publishing company in the UK that employs, 2 people on a good day. They're probably our smallest member. Whether you're the big publisher or the tiny publisher, whether you are the big retailer or the tiny retailer, our standards can do the same thing for you at roughly the same price. Now, they need to support the business problems. But EDItEUR looks at this globally. We look at your business problems. We also look at the business problems in France or in Germany or in Japan or in China. We try to develop standards that work globally. They encourage that competition. They encourage a level playing field for everybody. They promote interoperability. Nobody builds systems that can only work with one other company. What you want is a system that helps you communicate with every company out there. And that's what we develop. So I'm going to look at two particular standards. And the first one is Onyx for books. Now, this is the standard for which EDItEUR is best known. There are, I know, one or two companies in Turkey who have been using Onyx for books, but in some other countries it's absolutely ubiquitous. Nielsen in the UK receives data feeds in the Onyx format from between 400 and 500 other companies. And more or less, these are all in the same format and can all be automated. So those 400 or 500 data feeds can be dealt with by maybe 1 or 2 people. Whereas you get 400 or 500 Excel spreadsheets, every single one different, you need 20 people to deal with it instead of 2. It's very much more expensive to deal with data if it comes in a non-standard format. So Onyx is a standard that's used very widely and globally. It's based on XML, so I don't want to get too deeply into the technology. I am a technologist at heart, and I can't really help myself from showing you a few technical slides. But that XML format is another open standard. It's also free to use. It's used to communicate information about books, the title, the author, the ISBN, the publication date, the price, but also a biography of the author, some marketing material, who is the distributor, if you are a bookshop, who should you order it from, a very broad range of data. Somebody this morning mentioned the 4 Ps of marketing. So that's the nature of the product, the price, how you promote it, and place, making it available in the market where somebody wants to buy it. Those 4 Ps, when they translate, they're probably not 4 Ps. But Onyx, as a standard, is deliberately designed to carry data about all 4 of those Ps. It's not just bibliographic information. It's price and supply chain information as well, and promotional information. A bit of history. Onyx has actually been around for, well, getting on for 20 years now. It was designed in 1999 and published in January of 2000. But there have been, because it evolves, several versions over the years, and the latest version is Onyx 3.0, and more specifically Onyx 3.0.4, because we have little tiny updates every couple of years. All of the documentation on this is available for free from EDItEUR. You can download it without ever telling us. You can start using Onyx without ever telling us. Now, don't, because we like to hear good stories. But the standard can be used by anybody, and we provide documentation, we provide guidelines on how to use it, we provide some technical tools to help you use it, and we provide what are called code lists. For some of you, if I say controlled vocabularies, that will make more sense. They're the kind of the nouns in the Onyx language. So we have a specification, we have a best practice guide, and these are all available in PDF and HTML. I want to look at a little bit of real Onyx for this book. Now, I did try to learn how to say this. So is this something like Ederja Dovmeli Kiz? Laugh if you want. I know I can't speak Turkish. But in Onyx, this book looks like this. At least that's a little chunk of Onyx that tells you what the title is. Now, the yellow is the data, the purple is the Onyx. And it looks like there's not very much data. Onyx is very verbose. But Onyx is not intended to be read by people. It's intended to be read by computers, and computers do verbose very easily. Verbose is not a problem for a computer. We also know that that book is itself a translation. So you can provide the first title, which is the Turkish title, but you can also provide the second title, the one down below here, which is the title in Swedish. Onyx allows you the flexibility to work in different languages, even different languages at the same time. And so the Onyx data for that book can include information about the Turkish version and also a little bit of information about the original Swedish. You'll see there that where it says title type 03, that's important, and it introduces you to the idea of the Onyx code list. Just off the top of the screen, it says title type 01. And type 01 means this is the name of the book. Type 03 means this is the original title in the original language. How do you know that? Nobody really knows that 01 means actual title of the book and 03 means original title. You can look it up. We have a website which lists all of those codes. This is the English version, but it's also available as of last week in Turkish, and thank you to Turkish Publishers Association for doing this translation and making it available via our website. Now, if I look at this part of the website, you'll see there in the second column, the code column, type 01 says, I shan't even try, that means the English, sorry, it means the title of the book itself, and type 03, if the translation is right, means this is the title of the book when it was published in its original language. So those codes are important to the way that you understand and interpret Onyx. Here's another little bit of Onyx, and this is information about the translator, a chap called Ali Arda. And how do I know he's the translator? Well, it's bound up in that code B06. If you look up that code B06 on the website, it says translator, or whatever the Turkish is for translator. You'll also notice it doesn't just have his name there, it also can have information about him, a biography, that helps retailers to promote that book. And you'll see also that there's a number in the middle there. Now, Ali Arda happens to have a unique number called an ISNI. This is a name identifier. Just as books have ISBNs, authors and illustrators and translators can have ISNIs. And as it happens, Ali Arda has an ISNI, and that number is unique to him, and it differentiates him from any other Ali Ardas. I know, for example, there's an Ali Arda who was a geographer, and I studied geography at university, and so this is Ali Arda the translator, and not Ali Arda the geographer. And this is the website of the ISNI system. You can actually look people up. Chances are a few people in this room probably already have numbers, ISNIs, without even knowing. So look them up on isni.org/search. Another little bit of Onyx. In this case, this is a review of the book, a review taken from a German newspaper, built on Sunday, and it's related to this book. This is part of the promotional information for the book. And then just to show you what a price looks like, this would be the price of that book. It's 45 Turkish lira, so that's 41 2/3 of a lira plus the tax. And you'll see there's information that says it's a reduced rate tax at 8%. And that price is only valid in Turkey, because if you sell it in any other country, like, say, selling this Turkish translation in Germany, you may want to choose a different price. Now, this is a recommended price. You'll see there from price type 02 at the top. But if you wanted to use fixed prices, then you can just change that to price type 04. It's the same price, but this is a fixed price. Again, the exact numbers, the little codes there, tell you exactly how to interpret the data. And if you build up all of these bits of Onyx, join them all together, you have all the information you need to create a website a bit like that. I've actually checked this particular web page from the DNR website, and every piece of information on this page could come from Onyx. Now, I don't know how DNR creates these, but I rather suspect it's quite a labor-intensive process that can be automated using Onyx. How much time do I have left? About 10 minutes? Okay. I want to talk a little bit about Thema. So Thema is one of our other standards. It's a relatively new standard. Whilst Onyx has been around for nearly 20 years, Thema is less than 5 years old. It's still a small child. Thema is about subject classification. It's about making sure that potential purchasers know what your book is about. In my examples that I use in training, it's always a book about tractors. But you need detail on that, because a book about tractors that's aimed at a farmer and a book about tractors that's aimed at a 6-year-old boy, they're very different books. So we need precision in what the book is about. And that also, as well as feeding through to retail and allowing the retailer to sell your book in the most effective way, the subject information also feeds into the sort of statistics that Andre showed and allows you to analyze the market and hopefully react to changes in that market rather quickly. So the adult coloring books example that was shown, how depressing that was, can be revealed only because there is a subject code for adult coloring books. And if you didn't have a subject code that allowed you to split those books out in the statistics, you would not be able to spot that trend. Now, I don't want to overemphasize this, because subject, what the book is about, is only one way that people choose books. There's some statistics, they're quite old now, and they're based on people who bought books from Amazon US 5 or 6 years ago. But there's a whole range of reasons why people buy books. They buy them because of the subject. They buy them simply because other people buy them. They buy them because of price promotions. And they buy them because of recommendations that come from other people. So all sorts of reasons, but subject is one of those reasons. It's actually a big part of the orange section. It's about half of the orange section. There's lots of ways of classifying books by subject. In libraries, they're familiar with classification systems like Dewey and UDC. These are all very detailed. You need training to use them often. In the case of UDC, you need quite a lot of training. So in the book publishing world, we have rather simpler schemes. BISAC is fairly well known in the US, BIC, fairly well known in the UK, WGS, fairly well known in Germany. But the fact is that every country has a different subject scheme. And that's just wasteful, because the actual books that we sell are very similar. So why do we have all these different schemes? So many schemes that converting between them gets to be very difficult. This is an example here of trying to convert between the BIC scheme and the BISAC scheme. And we notice, for example, that the BIC scheme differentiates between biography and autobiography, whereas BISAC does not. On the other hand, BISAC on this side provides lots more detail about the biographies of artists and architects and photographers, musicians, composers, and entertainers, whereas the BIC scheme doesn't provide you with that level of detail. Mapping doesn't work. So we, at EDItEUR, and many other people, created Thema. Thema is intended from the outset to be not a national scheme based in one country, but an international scheme that everybody can use. Started in about 2012, 2013, and we released a kind of test version in late 2013. Now, this is a high-risk thing to do. I also have cartoons. And this is a cartoon that illustrates the problem when you create a new standard. You start with too many standards, and you create a new one in order to simplify things, but you now have too many plus one. And it's very difficult to get rid of those old standards. But luckily with Thema, some of those old standards are dying away, and they are being replaced by Thema. So, we start in about 2013. We had very strong endorsement for our strategy from the International Publishers Association. Jens Bammel was the Secretary General at the time, and they were very much in favour of Thema as a global scheme. But also Amazon. The retailers too are very much in favour of this, though they're slow to take it on. Amazon in the rest of Europe now bases its browse by subject. If you want to look for books about tractors, you're actually using Thema without really knowing it. Amazon's browse by subject is based very directly now on Thema. So what is it like? Well, it's a big hierarchy of subjects. It works like BIC, it works like BISAC, it works like all of those other schemes. Maybe I would say it works better. But there's about 3,000 different subjects, and they can be refined, made more detailed, using 4,000 qualifiers. Now, qualifiers can't be used on their own. They just add detail. And every subject has a code. So the MKE code means dentistry, but it also means Zahnheilkunde in German, and it means odontologia in Spanish, and it means, now I'm guessing it's probably Dischlik. Somebody say it for me. Okay, so I was close. But it also means that, which I'd written down in my notes so I can check. Tfil esnene, something like that. And it also means that, which is pronounced something like yaku in Chinese. The same code means the same thing everywhere, irrespective of the language that you use. We have Thema available in lots of different languages, with more on the way. I'm going to skip a few slides now, and again show you that the codes can be looked up. This is a website that EDItEUR provides to you. There's no need to log on or anything. You can just go to the URL that you see at the top of the screen, and it will, with luck, automatically select that version for you. My computer goes to the English version. Your computer, if it's set up right, should go to the Turkish version, and you can navigate through the hierarchy and pick your subject codes. Different types of football, for example. So this book would be classified in this particular way. The code would be FH, thriller and suspense fiction. But Thema encourages you to use several codes if you need to, and you could also use the code FFL and FFS, and maybe even one DNSSEAA, because this book is set. The story happens in Stockholm. It's a detail that can't be given with most other schemes. Of course, Thema can be carried in Onyx as well. That would be what it looks like. Okay, I want to just sum up with a couple of things. Onyx 3, it provides a global standard that enables publishers and retailers to communicate very detailed information about their products. All of the information that a retailer needs can be in that one data file. And Thema provides a global standard way of describing what the book is about. Open standards help business communication, and they help us challenge the real problems in our industry. Thank you very much. I'll just take one or two questions. If it's in Turkish, give me a few seconds. Are there any questions? Yes.
Are you going to talk about linked content coalition?
Oh, you were the one with your hand up.
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe you can.
No, I'm not going to talk about linked content coalition. I will say one thing. The Linked Content Coalition is a standards body for other standards bodies. It's about trying to develop standards that concern how standards are created. Now, if you think Onyx is about metadata, then maybe the Linked Content Coalition is about metadata. If you want to talk about LCC, then I'll speak to you afterwards. Anybody else? Yes.
It seems you are providing so much for the Turkish publishers as well, and may I learn that if it is it possible to get the presentation for free as well?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
We'll make it available to the organisers of the conference today, and they can distribute it to everybody. Okay, thank you very much.